People only get angry at the truth or their perception of what is true. So you may have come across an occurrence of you're talking to someone and you start escalating into an argument over about either something very serious, like say a political matter, or something innocuous, something trivial. And at one point, you say something that's, well, to you, that's obviously true. For example, it can be something as simple as the sky is blue. This politician is doing this. And then suddenly the other person has a complete meltdown. They start saying, "Oh, that's completely wrong. That's BS. So you should be ashamed of yourself for saying that. Nobody listened to this guy." And they just go on in this rage-filled argument, and you're like, well, "Where did this come from?" Like, I just said something very simple. It could be something very obvious as well, and they're having just freaking out about it. It's like what I said was completely true, but that's the problem. It's true. You need to understand that everyone's operating from their own perspective. And through their own perspective, they are perceiving the truth through their own interpretations, right? Because there is an objective truth that don't let anyone fool you by saying, oh, everyone has their own truth. No, there is a truth. Now, your appreciation of the truth, that is different. That's all from everyone's different perspective. I'll give you an example, right? Say I'm playing football, American football, right? And I have a football in my hand. And I'm going to go to throw it, but my buddy over here, he knocks it out of my arm. He knocks it out of my hand. And I somewhat drop it, but my hand's still going forward, and the ball goes forward and hits the ground. So that event is the truth. That no matter who you are, what you did, your background or anything, the fact of the matter is that action happened. That my the football was in my hand and it moved like 2 feet forward, but it was also kind of knocked out by this other guy's hand. That's the truth. Now your interpretation of what how you're labeling that action is different for everyone else. Some people will claim it's a fumble, other people will claim that it's an incomplete pass, others will say it's intentional grounding. Really, that's the interpretation that that everyone has to come everyone's trying to come to an agreement of what that action was. And that's the appreciation. Doesn't change the fact that I still made that motion. How this relates to everything else is that we are all using communication to try to relay what we think is real and what our perspective of the reality what we have. The problem is that it's very easy to get locked into your own bias or perspective that we're seeing through our own eyes 100% of the time. So it's very easy for people to get caught up in what I personally see is the objective truth. And there's all sorts of filters that we have, both external and internal, of how we're perceiving reality. Like an external one, for example, is color blindness, right? So theoretically, every single person sees color just slightly differently, some more than others. So, for example, I have a red mouse. Now, the truth is that this mouse is this color, but what the perspectives come in is what kind of shade is it red. For some person, this is like, oh, this is the bright red, really like stand out perfectly red. But someone else can come along and say, oh, it's kind of more like brown, right? And it doesn't change how the mouse is. It's just our perspective. Another one is internal biases, right? So we might see someone do an action, for example, like we see some kind of violence occurring. Now, from one person's perspective, they have a bias, and they might have a bias and say that's completely wrong. That person should be punished. Another person, say me, I could say, through my experience and my beliefs, I can say, no, that person is completely in the right. They're justified in doing that. No need to go into context, but you've probably been in those situations where two people are seeing the same thing, but just coming back with different results based on either prior experiences or beliefs. This is where today's lesson really comes in. That when people are confronted with a truth that they don't like or isn't congruent with their current perception of reality, it makes them very uncomfortable. And this is called cognitive dissonance. That they possess either a belief or an action that they currently have, and suddenly they are confronted with a contradictory belief or action that they're now kind of realizing is more correlated with the truth. And that makes them very uncomfortable because that makes your mind have a lot of unpredictability and it's just evolutionary reasons. Once cognitive dissonance happens, there's three different results you can get. One is the prior belief or action changes. The new belief or action is changes, or rejection of everything, where they just say, screw you, I'm not doing this, that's so wrong, you're out of line for saying that. And that's really what it kind of boils down to. So, for example, if going back to the sky is blue argument, that if I say the sky is blue and for whatever reason this person over here, let's call him Bill, he has a very strong interest in believing that the sky is green, but I come with undeniable fact that the sky is blue. There's loads of reasons why he could be upset with that truth, even though it's just very simple. It could be involved with ego. It could be, like I said, with cognitive dissonance, where he now has to change his prior beliefs, say that he's believed for years, which that the sky is green, which could be difficult. Or it could lead to other consequences about his belief system or his behavior that he doesn't want to address. The classic example is the pacifist. So if I claim to be a pacifist and I tell everyone I'm a pacifist, but then suddenly you come along and tell me, well, Mike, that just last week you just got into a fight with some dude on the street, and the week before you got into a confrontation at a bar somewhere, and I start thinking, like, I claim to be all about peace, but my behavior is like very violent. So I might just violently reject what you said because that will lead me to reflect on my own behavior, which can be very uncomfortable. So now that you understand this, it's very important to start thinking, okay, how does this apply to my own life? That I've experienced these kinds of situations before that, yes, people get angry at the truth, but so what? How can I use this in my own life? And that's what I'm all about, getting solutions. So, how does this apply to you? How can I use this information for my own benefit? And personally, for me, knowing this fact that people get angry at the truth, I use it to figure out what is true. Take it in reverse. That see what people are getting angry at and see why they're getting angry at it. And that can also lead to, what is real and what's not. Because sometimes that's very hard to figure out. There's a saying that if you're in a war and you're flying a plane, you're going to receive the most flack when you're right over your target. And that's often true for, hatred and violence and outrage is when you're really nailing down on something that's important or something that is very vulnerable, you're going to receive the most backlash at that moment, right? So I try to avoid any kind of politics with my channel. Is that's not what we're about. We're about getting solutions and improving our lives instead of just wasting our time with nonsense. But you may have noticed over the past few years or so that there's a lot of vitriol about certain kinds of topics that people feel very persuaded or coerced into believing a certain way, or else there are going to be bad repercussions. Um, So we have very controversial topics of, of diseases, of elections, and all sorts of other stuff, that big topics. And if you notice that if you take a certain stance on these topics, even like asking just very simplistic questions, there's certain groups of people that will have very vitriolic responses to you, that they will shame you for just even asking a question, very mundane question, that about the validity of their topic, right? If I'm confident about a subject, like say this, that people get angry when they hear the truth, I have no problem with someone coming on and asking like, "Oh, how about this? Why is that?" That doesn't make sense because I'm confident in what I'm saying. When you're not confident and subconsciously you kind of realize that your position is not strong, that's when you get really upset. And those things I just brought up, those are big, but in the grand scheme of things, those are kind of trivial topics. There's some things you need to realize, that there's some topics that if you even bring up or even make mention of, you will be completely ostracized for and completely shunned. You need to realize that these topics that are true, you're going to realize that they're truths, can fundamentally shake up how our society is structured. That our society, the Western civilization, is based off of a lot of lies that have been disproven, but just how our society is functioning, that they need to be true. If you figure those out, you can find out some pretty serious stuff. But of course, if you even make mention of it, you can have some pretty serious consequences. Right? So, my advice to you is trust your own eyes, trust your own instincts, right? Especially if you're a smart guy. Because there's a lot of people out there trying to deceive you and try to lie to you about things that are not in your best interest. And you need to do your best to avoid that. Because the truth will set you free. All right. If you found this helpful, please like the video to let YouTube know that this video is good. And thank you for watching.